Hello everyone, welcome to From Nowhere to Nothing, Ontological Oxymorons. I'm your host, Joel Bouchard, a graduate student in education, and with me is Mr. Norman Gayford, a professor of English and philosophy. Branding is a concept that has gradually grown increasingly complex over time. While first referring to marking livestock with a hot iron, the term has expanded to corporate symbolism and now to something even more: the values, beliefs, and characteristics of any number of entities, including people themselves. We'll examine the topic using our signature brand of informal banter. All right, so this is an extension. It's going to be kind of an extension of our previous talk on symbolism because branding, I mean, really, if you look at symbolism as being a Lego, branding is the castle or the race car that you build out of it, right? A brand is made up of numerous types of symbols that kind of cross sensory boundaries. You're going to have lingual aspects, visual aspects, auditory, jingles. You'll have a lot of things that go into modern branding. But before we get into all that, maybe we should give sort of a history or a timeline of what a brand is. What constitutes a brand?
Well, you started with the marking of the cattle, so to speak. We own this. This is our thing. And I don't know. I think it would be probably anthropologically, people have tagged maybe when that first began, but it strikes me that that's probably a very ancient thing, marking this because it's mine. There's an owning kind of thing. But the branding of the kind that we're talking about now, I think formally we're talking from the 1950s onward, really from the explosion of the advertisement culture. I mean, the advertisement existed long before that, but I think the amount of money placed into it and the willful need to manipulate probably emerged around that time.
Right. Yeah. So I mentioned in the intro that it started out with simply branding, and it's grown more complex.
Yeah.
And really, it's almost sort of changed the role, right? Because branding started out, you were putting your mark on something to claim ownership.
Yep.
Now, really, you're taking a set of attributes and trying to attribute it to yourself or to your company or to something
You're
else.
trying to own a code of ethics. You're trying to own an ambient, zeitgeisty, gestalty, unpinnable thing and saying, this is us. I mean, nobody does this better than colleges. To me, and I'm going to go there because of the experience, right? Colleges will spend thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars to brand themselves. In my experience, branding didn't become a conversation piece within a collegiate environment until the early 90s, when money was expended to go through a process of changing the logo, which then changed again for the particular place that I worked for. But and the interesting thing is that if you look at and you have with the material on branding, among other things, is about selling, there's capitalism, a story through a symbol. And that's only one of the things we talk about today. But if you look at colleges' mission statements, every one of them has the word success 2, 3, 10, 15 times. Excellence, the same thing. So we all claim to give you success. We all claim to give you excellence. And maybe we all strive to give you excellence, but there's an attempt to brand that which is not brandable. Well, one college has this logo and says, "Well, we're giving you excellence over here, and we're giving you excellence over here, and exceeding expectations, and so on." Well, okay, what does that mean about the expectations? What are you assuming about them in the first place? And it becomes branding becomes a kind of smoke and mirrors, hocus pocus making you think that you've seen something or heard something that you haven't. I'm going to go specific things. Subaru.
Right, yeah.
All right. Love. It's what makes a Subaru a Subaru. What the actual?
and like you said, the smoke and mirrors part is really big, especially. I mean, Subaru is a big one, right? Because Subaru, if you didn't know any better, you'd assume Subaru was like an Australian car maker. You know, you have the Outback, they're driving through the desert. It's made in Japan. So there's some a little bit of misleading there. And college is a big one. Colleges expend a lot of money making their campuses look old because there's a subconscious association with that age of an institution, giving it credibility, giving it something. So there's schools that were started in the 70s or 80s or 90s, and they build them out of brick and they grow ivy up the side of them so that they look prestigious. Even though they haven't been around since the 1600s, like Harvard. They haven't been, it's not Oxford or Cambridge or something, it's just a private school that's trying to establish credibility through these symbols,
There's an institution that I know of that decided that the very most important symbol was the parking lot. Because the parking lot is the place that you first encounter. And so the parking lot had to look like there'd been trees growing there forever. No, these trees were shipped in, put in the ground, and cultivated, and so it's look over here, look at this. Never mind that. Or we're doing this, but we're doing it differently than everybody else. Oh, how are you excellent differently than others?
Right? Yeah, and that's a fascinating brand philosophy. The parking lot as the primary symbol for an institution of higher education. But yeah, and so like you said, it's an amorphous sort of thing. So you're saying excellence and success. But for different institutions in different parts of the country, it can mean different things. So if you're down south, excellence and success might mean having the most winning football team, as opposed to anything to do with academics. Whereas, if you're at a research institution, you might be publishing so many papers. Or if you're at in a technology institution, it might be patenting so many things, So success and excellence, like you said, every single institution is promoting success and excellence, but what that means for their specific context can vary, in just to an extreme degree.
That's where the principles thing comes in, because we have a mission statement, and then you have SUNY is one of those that here's my old fashioned, love the King Arthur stuff, right? SUNY, when I started with them, had this shield, and it said, "Let each become all he is capable of being." And I was in. I thought, yes. I mean, it had he rather than they. It could have been changed, right? But over the course of years, that became no longer a mission. That just was, in fact, there were administrators who said, "Well, that's not a mission statement. That's a slogan. We have to have a 5-page mission statement. We have to have 2 committees working on it.
It has to be specific and measurable."
Right. And bulleted items about what this means. Here are our principles. This is, but often those go to that too. So I'm not being cynical about this, but I too much. But I think that's part of the nature of branding. You so want to rush to make yourself different than everybody else, and then you end up being the same.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's look at a bit of the essence of branding a little bit more. What do you think what is the basis of branding? It's based in symbolism?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you want to expound on the connection to that a little bit, or do you think we've kind of covered it for the most part?
Well, I just think it's good that you brought it up to remind us. I mean, because the symbolism part is supposed to be, it's intended to be, what distinguishes us from everyone else. And that's why branding specialists will say your visual symbol must imply, they say tell a story, but I don't see many symbols telling a story. They imply or allude to stories. We talked about the Exxon Mobil, Pegasus as an example, or the Nike lightning bolt, implying swiftness. But I don't see that happening in symbols all across.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I feel like saying that your symbol should tell a story it's almost counterintuitive to me. I feel like symbols are, in branding symbols, the majority of them are very simplistic. They're trying to give you the very bare minimum that's needed in order to inspire a certain pattern of thoughts or feelings towards a product.
Yeah. It's supposed to be making... See, I sat through this rather extensive workshop with branding experts as part of this whole previous life process anyway. And they were emphasizing this. And of course, being a story person, a narrative person, a literature person, I in conversation will bring that, what you just brought up. This is... And there's, we're suggesting so you make the story. It just will be the right story about the place that you make because we've given you the right suggestions. So I can't make up my own story with these parts. I'm supposed to be able. Okay.
Yeah, it's almost like writing a pop song, right? Because it's like, all right, you want it to be catchy and get stuck in people's heads, so. Yeah, you can write whatever song you want, but you have to use these certain chords, these certain melodies, these certain rhythms in order to make it catchy. But that does vary from brand to brand, right? So if you have something like something that's supposed to be complex, maybe like a college, maybe like a wine or a perfume or something, having a complex visual symbol might play out to you. And you see some of these where they have shields and ribbons and banners and all these things. Yep. And so you look at it and you're like, wow, I can't make out what's in this picture, but it definitely looks elegant and complex, whereas other brands, it's like Nike, you got the swish, you know what that, you know what's being inspired by it. So
I should say we're not bashing any particular company here.
Yeah.
We're just talking, but the companies put these out there so we can talk about them. What is McDonald's? Everyone says the golden arches, right? Mm-hmm. What does that golden M really say? If it's a golden arch, what are we saying? You're going to heaven because you're eating the food? What's the story? I don't see a story. This is the problem I have with this. I'm sitting listening to experts saying there's a story implied here. No, even with Pegasus, well, there's an allusion to a whole cluster of stories in which that animal character shows up. But which story are you telling? Or are you just trying to suggest characteristics? Mm-hmm. And that's not a storytelling.
I think that is more it, right? Because when I think of the golden arches, I think of French fries. There's that immediate primal connection. When I think of the Pegasus with gasoline, I'm thinking of, performance. Not necessarily the stories or the deeper meanings. Which isn't to say that the branding and the marketing experts aren't thinking about those things. They are. I think every aspect of branding and marketing is thought out ahead of time.
Font. Recently, just a few years ago, Walmart and Walgreens were having it out because of a closeness in font. And that battle cost $5 or $6 million because of a font choice. And I was teaching this in my technical writing class. I was talking about this, and people say, "Oh, people don't pay attention to font." Well, apparently they do. Apparently, there's a psychological association that we pick it up. Oh, that's that company. That's not. We're not even necessarily seeing. Mm-hmm. So branding isn't just about primarily what companies represent. It's more for us. Well, you and I are on the same page with this. Is an association that we're somehow supposed to just immediately make because of that visual. Well, Target, it felt that way sometimes. The red and white. I mean, it's with a dot in the middle. Why is that appealing? What is it telling me? Is it telling me that I'm supposed to shoot for this kind of stuff? I walk into Target when I want to get something for Target, but it's not because I think.
Yeah, and
story.
There's no doubt that there's innumerable amounts of psychological science behind it. Like there are people with master's degrees and PhDs that spent hours in meetings fighting and struggling and with alternatives and all kinds of things. And they decided that it would be an appealing thing. And the success of the business would seem to imply that they had some merits to it. Obviously, there's no alternative timeline where we can test this hypothesis and see, well, if they had gone with a different strategy, would it have been more successful? Maybe you could do like a historical analysis of brands that have changed their branding over time and see if that has any measure of success, which is still not purely scientific, but you could lend you some insights. But there's just very little doubt that branding is an extremely important thing, despite what appears on the surface to be the triviality of it, And so, what does that mean? What is that telling us? It's the importance of the symbolism, right? And
give us. I think partly for me, and this goes to something else we've talked about before, but it gets us. Some of us to be in the space of when you live a life questioning everything, you're just going to question. All right, so you think about what is it that I own of this company, or what is it about this company that I want to own, or why am I being drawn to this? Is this brand really drawing me? Is it because I've had good experience with it, or is it just because it's pretty, or what? I think Tesla. I've always found that T fascinating, so I looked it up, and I saved this here. So if you picture Tesla, it looks like a letter T, but Elon Musk asked it to be designed to indicate a cross section of an electric motor that represents a section of the stator and rotor that comprises one. So and you look really closely, and there is a mechanistic, I'm showing Joel this, you can't see it but feel to it, a sharpness, a machine thing, not an organic thing. Well, when you're buying a Tesla, you're thinking, if you do, all kinds of things, but you're thinking, how is this different from other cars? Well, it's electric. Well, what is it doing differently? And that symbol isn't telling a story, but that symbol suggesting something.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's really fascinating. I mean, we can talk about all different aspects of it. And, for brands, it varies from brand to brand what the important aspects of it are. And there are certain brands that make use of many of them. They have not just the characteristics and attributes, but they also have a visual symbol. They have a jingle. They have all of these different things. You know what a big one is for me? Like the Toyota. If you think about Toyota commercials, they have a 2-note jingle. Din, din,
Yep.
The commercial starts, din, din. 2 notes, but it will, it'll stick in your head.
Yeah.
And, I know as a musician, those are things that are very, they're examined under a microscope for sure. Jingle writing. And again, it's just like what we were talking about with the visual symbolism. You're trying to find the simplest, most direct way to convey a feeling that has numerous complex associations with it. And to me, that's the fascinating part of the branding is the complex human psychology that goes behind it. So,
yes.
Wow. I'm in 2 notes. I have to represent what this car company means, and not just, what the philosophy of the car building is, but what kind of messages we want to instill in people, all these different things in 2 notes, it's
I think of the Windows little ditty that it's more than 2 notes. It's like 4 or 5 when it comes, you're in Windows.
Yeah.
Well, there are all kinds of associations with Windows.
Right.
Too,
yeah.
But that person who composed, there must have been a process, and the person who ended up composing that hit on something for that committee that chose it.
Yeah. So I'll ask you, this will probably be our first question of the episode. Normally we don't get this far. We've mostly just been discussing stuff, but I'm going to ask you a question. Okay. And that is, are brands made by corporations, or do customers make brands?
Ooh, what an interesting question. I think there is an interplay. The companies generate logos, they generate jingles, they generate text and so advertisements and so on. So the companies build the brand, but if people don't buy it, then so what? And often they go to try to find a different. We've got to rebrand ourselves. What's interesting is companies are rebranding themselves more rapidly now than they used to. I mean, every few years, some companies have a new approach. But if customers didn't, the capitalism thing, if customers didn't buy in, then the brand has failed. Customers become brand loyal because somebody's done something right to sell them on. So done the right things to sell them. So I think customers invigorate or foundationalize the brand.
Yeah, it's kind of an organic thing, right? Companies are planting the seed, but really customers are kind of the water and the sunlight, and which direction that tree grows, the companies don't have any control over. That part of it is customer kind of based. And it does come back to whatever quality it is that the product has. So, if your Windows is crashing all the time, then those notes are going to
annoy.
It's going to give you bad feelings, And then you need rebranding. That's when you have to come up with a new jingle to go along with a new product. It's not enough to just rebrand and keep the same hunk of garbage, or it'll just be a matter of time before there's the same associations.
I think companies learn from the successes. Now, I'm not an economist, I'm not a business person, so I'm talking through my philosophical hat. But I think there are social trends that I find sad in what they say about at least some companies and the economy not valuing individuals. So you can go down through a devolution of a kind, where you have a village, and I did not grow up in an idyllic situation, but it was a nice village in a number of ways. And it had all kinds of mom and pop shops. You wanted clothes, you went to this shop. You wanted the TV, you went to that shop. It's like, it was all there. Then the box, so-called stores began. But now we've got a devolution from the box stores. So think of the way that people talk about Target, whatever. Okay, fine. But then we have Walmart and the Walmart Supercenter. But even that gets to be too expensive for some people. But now we got Dollar General. What are we going to have next? 50-cent Universal? I mean, people are not paid what they should be paid. And people will even defend companies not paying them what they should be paid because they don't want to lose the company. So the brand becomes then a necessity. That's where I think it gets really vile. We've got to have this brand. But if we can't, well, we'll have this. And so once upon a time, a Dollar General would have been eschewed in most communities. And now it's a vital part because people don't have the resources to go out and get anything else because the economy is not helping people. So the brand becomes the lifesaver.
Right. And so that brings up a really interesting question, right? So brands are out to represent a certain way, but they don't have much control over it. Why do you think it is that a brand like Dollar General, for instance, so why do people they don't associate the oppression or the negative aspects that it takes on employees or sourced labor of products, that sort of thing? Why don't those associations come to the forefront? Do you think it's purely because the company isn't representing them?
I think it's partly because the company's not represented them. I think it's also, as you alluded to or directly said before, a complicated psychology. People are, and this is not justifying it, but I think it's a descriptor. I think people are too worn out. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to own where these things are coming from. They get frustrated when you buy something and then it's broken a week and a half later. But that's somehow not the company's fault, because after all, we know they're just giving us cheap stuff. So it's okay. But I think it's an unwillingness, perhaps generated by poverty, unfair economics, and all the rest of it. It's an unwillingness or an incapacity to come to terms with what it really means. Just tell, and this is where I think is the hypnotic, dulling nature of branding. Don't pay attention. Just go through just go here and get your stuff. You know you need your stuff. Don't be complicated about it. I think companies strokes that ambiance. But I think people often just don't tell me about this. I don't want to hear about anybody else. I just got to go do this because it's right there. It's right next door.
Right. Yeah. Then, branding can definitely, there's a quality aspect to it, right? So when you think Dollar General, you do think lower quality than Walmart. When you think Walmart, you think lower quality than Target or whatever. But that doesn't necessarily influence... it influences people's buying behavior, but it doesn't necessarily discourage consumption from the business altogether, right?
No.
So I've bought things from all three of those stores, right?
Yeah.
Even though, and they all source similar products,
yes.
So having branding as a quality indicator is kind of interesting, and then even where that places you, right? So, McDonald's serves food, so does, insert high-end restaurant. Mm-hmm. But they're not competing against each other, even though they're both serving food. Food is as general as their two demographics overlap. Beyond that, almost everything is different. And so the branding will reflect that as well.
Yeah.
So it's pretty interesting. So I'll ask you this: do you think a brand can be stolen or hijacked then, if the company isn't in complete control of it?
Oh, you just set me up so well. Insert no. Joel is going to have to back me off if I can. Okay, because I mentioned this at a different podcast, but I will keep it as generalized as possible because I think it's a legitimate thing. Do I think a brand can hijack or be hijacked? Mm-hmm. Yes. And I go back to the quintessential symbol that anybody in any country goes to, which is a flag. A flag is supposed to represent an entire nation, but it can be hijacked purposefully or perhaps sometimes inadvertently, but I think probably with intent. If you believe in this, then you have to believe in that. You don't get to interpret what that flag means. X-dominant culture will tell you what that flag means. Well, if you don't get to interpret a symbol, then it's no longer a symbol. Then it is a sign.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And then to the degree to which you get to somehow manipulate that symbol way past what is considered formal acceptable boundaries and established rules, then you have morphed that symbol into perhaps another symbol. And people try to associate the two things, and that gets all messed up.
Right. Yeah, I was reading a really interesting study that just came out where they were looking at flags and determining people's attitudes and interpretations of them. Mm-hmm. And what they found was that the thin blue line flags are essentially an anti-Black Lives Matter flag.
Yes.
Which is fascinating because if you were to read the mission statements of these two organizations, they're not things that would be mutually exclusive, right? You could support police, and you could also support the fact that, black
policing can be done better.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So you could support both of those positions, but because of the branding of the two flags, they're seen as being in direct opposition to one another.
Yeah. And
the branding of those two flags is not directly influenced by the movements that started them. So there's and this brings up an entirely other thing. A brand is not there's no such thing as a brand necessarily, because everybody is going to interpret a brand differently, right? Mm-hmm. And the two flags are a perfect example. People who support the thin blue line flags associate a certain characteristics and certain things with that brand, whereas people who support the Black Lives Matter movement interpret that same flag with almost antithetical attributes, and vice versa. Yeah. So, yeah, branding is, we've been talking about it so far as like almost a concrete set of characteristics, but really it's a very fluid thing. It's something that is up for interpretation.
It is up for interpretation, and there are entities, companies or organizations, or elements of countries that will try to solidify what is fluid. And that's where I think there's a real problematic aspect to that. If you say you own that symbol because that symbol stands for X, Y, and Z, and that's all it can stand for, then you are inviting out anybody who might have made associations with that symbol. And so we'll back away from the flag for a moment. Just talk about a symbol for a company. If you're inviting me out, I'm not going to buy your product. Mm. If you want me to make associations of my own with that symbol for reasons, and I might not even be able to talk to my neighbor, but we both go and buy that same product, then that's the fluidity.
Mm. Yeah, so, it's fascinating. And we're, again, I'll make a reference to modern events, even though we try not to, but we just had a presidential election. And that is the one thing I noticed this time around, as opposed to the past few times, is I don't think before this time I ever saw a flag promoting a candidate. Mm-hmm. And now you see them everywhere. They're almost as common as the signs you put in your yard or the bumper stickers. Yeah. You see the flags flying. Do you think that flag, right? What do you think that the flag itself has to say, as opposed to the sign or the bumper sticker? Do you think that they all represent different messages, even if they're printed with the same image or text?
I think that they do, because of the weight of the abundance of the rhetorical hammering that goes with it. In the current situation, I have found great difficulties with the flag in the sense of it being used as it's being used, because it is inviting out an entire half of the population. Mm. It is associating unvalues or a set of values that I find difficult with a person. And that's not what a flag is supposed to do. It's not supposed to be associated with a person. It's quite the opposite. But this is a long conversation.
Yeah,
a different one anyway. But I think that can be just as a symbol, as if there's a just, but as a symbol, if it resonates with power, that power cannot, if in a healthy way, be located as a locus of one ideology. Hmm.
Okay, yeah, that's really cool, and we'll probably talk about that a little bit more. But before we move on, I just want to cover the more abstract kind of conception of it. So I guess what I'm asking is, do you think that the medium themselves send different messages? So imagine you had a bumper sticker and a yard sign and a flag, and they all have the same image printed on them. Do you think that they are sending different messages just based purely on the fact that it's vinyl slapped on the back of a car or vinyl in the yard or nylon flag?
Interesting.
What do you think?
Interesting.
Because that's what I want to sort of get at, because like I said, this election, I've noticed Trump and Biden flags flying on houses. And I don't recall ever seeing that in previous elections. The yard signs, the bumper stickers you see, but there's flags now. What does the flag itself say, even if it has the exact same image and text printed on it as a bumper sticker or yard sign? What does the flag as an abstract thing say?
It is a deeply embedded, trained response, Joel. I mean, I think it's a brilliant question, and my answer won't be adequate, but it's something I have thought about a lot because of my work as a teacher in high school before I was teaching in college, and the necessity of the perceived necessity of ideologically training people from very young to pledge allegiance to a flag. That's embedded. That too is problematic because, in fact, if you look at the history of the Pledge of Allegiance, it has changed remarkably, and most people don't even know that. They think it's been around since the Revolution. Nope. Right. We're talking about a century-ish. It's gone through enormous changes. So even a pledge changes. But I think that just to get back to your question, the resonance of it is that fluttering piece of nylon cloth, whatever it has been, that animated motion, that's supposed to be something that represents all. And clearly doesn't when you put a name on it. And whether that's, I'm not being relativistic about that, but I have not seen Biden flags where one side is the American flag and the other side is Biden. I have seen those with Trump, which means you are associating as a product, as a brand. That flag is owned by people like this, and if you don't adhere to those values, then you're not part of this.
Right. Okay. So, I think that's really interesting. And as I'm thinking about it now, I think that it probably it's a pre-American concept because
flags.
If you go back to the Middle Ages and probably before, people would fly flags over castles and things.
Of course, yeah.
Those banners, those colors have always been representative of ownership, values, all of these different things.
An implied sharing of values.
And so my prediction would be, with the currently polarized nature of the political spectrum, you see more flags. I bet you there's an inverse relationship between flag advertisements and civic unity. I bet you if civic unity goes up, you see less flags.
Interesting.
And if you see more flags, it's probably the other way around. But so now we'll talk about the hijacking of symbolism a little bit. So, like you said, we've seen a lot of flags, but I think, and that's not new.
No,
we've always seen the American flag used in politics as a piece, and I think that it has a large. It's largely impacted by what you said before. It's been ingrained in us to, pledge allegiance to the flag, and politicians use it. And the message behind it, I guess in the past, you could debate it a little bit, but it's probably a message of unity. They fly the flags behind them to let people know that they're working for America. They're doing something in the best interest of America. It's just kind of sort of a unifying thing. And this time around, like you're saying, it's a little bit different. And it's not even just the official usage of it by the politicians.
No.
but the informal usage of it by supporters. Again, I never in my life before the past, probably not even 4 years, probably maybe 2 or 3 years, I would have never seen an American flag flying directly above a Confederate flag.
Yeah.
Or in the back of a truck.
Very problematic.
Or I've even seen flags now that are half American flag, half Confederate flag, or these sorts of things. And you never would have seen that in the past. And it's a hijacking of a symbol.
It is. What remains to be seen is how normalized it has actually become. Because we're too early in this process from a sociological view, from a psychological view. Right now, we're viewing this as aberrant. Well, let's see if you and I will probably view it as aberrant as long as we're on the planet. But does it become just a socially part of things? Yeah,
because especially in the area that we live, I feel like Confederate flags have always been around. But I think that the message you send if you're flying the Confederate flag by itself versus flying the Confederate flag with the American flag versus flying a flag that's half American and half Confederate, I think all of those things are sending different messages.
I'm laughing because and we know that the Confederate flag is not, as we recognize, is not the original Confederate.
Right. Yeah.
So. But here's where the lack of thought is happening to me. And people will hear this and say, he was an elitist. Well, yeah. and the fact of let's pursue our intellect, let's pursue our logic and our rationality. Let's think about what we're doing with symbols. If you're flying a Confederate flag and you're flying an American flag, you're saying, I believe in traitorous acts. As much as, or more than, I believe in unity. I believe in celebrating disunity. Oh, but then there's this unity there next to it. So I'm really being, in one sense, a kind of political bipolar positioning.
Yeah, really. If you're somebody who can fly them both together, or one that's half one and half the other, your conception of what the American flag stands for has to be something very different from what I think it represents, or
what we've been told it represents.
What we've been told it represents. Yeah, exactly. Because there was a point in time when these two flags fought against each other, right?
Yeah.
And so, how do you reconcile the two things that way? It's hard to comprehend.
It is.
So we'll wrap it up in a little bit of a lighter direction, right?
Okay,
let's look at let's ask what is do people have brands?
Well, we're told we're supposed to now, and that's really the absurdist science fictional thing that's going on, right? We're in a situation where really people are going to need to start copyrighting their DNA. Even my DNA is a brand? Well, I suppose it is, because my parents and grandparents and great-grandparents, somehow that melange of code is in me. But yeah, we're supposed to independent contractors. What's your brand? What's my brand? I'm an actor trying to find work, or I'm a teacher trying to figure out how I'm going to be tutoring people, or whatever. My brand? Am I supposed to distinguish myself from every other single practitioner within my same field? That's atomistic and well-nigh chaotic. So
right.
it's goofy.
Yeah, it's almost as if what they're asking, they're just using branding almost as a summative term to refer to previously what somebody would have said. What are your values? What are your beliefs? What are your, so it's almost just as if it's an expansion of the term, and it's a summative sort of thing. If somebody asks you what your brand is, it's just, what are you about?
Yeah.
Without asking those other questions that have, I guess, deeper implications. Branding
sidesteps the deeper conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
But with that said, what do you think your brand is? If you give me an adjective and a noun, what would be the slogan for your brand?
An adjective and a noun. Oh my goodness. My brand?
Yeah, your brand.
Thanks for flinging that one at me, man.
The one question he isn't ready for.
Energetic. To the point of fierce, but that's too many words. But energetic. Noun.
Or you can
scholar.
use whatever.
Scholar.
Energetic scholar. I like it. That's a good one.
Thank you for pushing me on that. Now your turn.
My turn. It's hard, and we've talked about it a little bit, almost not disparagingly, but as a surface phenomenon. Mm-hmm. But really, this is the kind of there's an art to it, right?
Yes,
because developing a visual trademark or a jingle or these things, yes, they're simplistic, but like we said, you're distilling down complex feelings and thoughts into something that you're trying to send a message that represents it all. And there's definitely an art form to it. And off the cuff, that's pretty hard. I'd say interdisciplinary explorer. That's what I'd like.
I
my
like
brand
that
to be.
too. Right? Yeah. I can almost see a Starfleet image of
that. Yeah, that's
really
what I want. I'm thinking like 50s rocket ship and the whole works, because and that's hard, and I'm sure that if I thought about it more, it would change over time, right?
Of course.
Because you come up with things that are more important to you, but really when I think about what are the things that are important, to me, and I think about how I've lived my life, okay, I'm always trying to do new and different things, mm-hmm. and crossing boundaries, and the pursuit of new kind of things. So that would be it, I guess.
My brand's the United Federation of Planets. Thank you very much.
So, do you think our podcast has a brand?
Well, I think it's. I hope that it has a set of characteristics. I think it certainly has an ethical directive. I'm thinking about the larger definition of brand. We have a theme song, by you. We have an image. So I guess technically,
yeah. I'm thinking about updating not the image itself, but as coincidentally, the font, because I like the image. The image is a picture that I took through a kaleidoscope.
Yeah,
and so it has. Again, it's a very complex, almost indecipherable picture. And it makes you wonder, what am I looking at? And it draws your eye all over. And that really encapsulates the podcast.
It does. It draws so far. And also the kaleidoscope, while it's a static image, implies an interpretation of light. A constant shifting of patterns in light that is coming through that device. So, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
What's wrong with the font?
I just don't like it, I guess.
Okay. I didn't know this.
Fonts, trying to establish why fonts are important. One of the big things is, if you're looking at it on a mobile device, it's hard to read.
Okay, that's a totally legitimate concern.
Yeah, so I think we need some bigger letters. I think that the letters themselves need to be a little bit, the spacing or the thickness of the letters need to be a little bit enhanced.
Well, now I'm going to dive in and start messing around with this.
Yeah.
I'm glad you told me.
So the image I think I did a good job with. The theme song is pretty good as well. Mm-hmm. Because the theme song talks about having questions. The music utilizes some atypical, in Western vernacular, harmonic and melodic motifs. So I think that the theme song and the image are good. I think the font just needs to change.
So all of which goes to say a lot of thought has gone into this.
Right. And, we're by no means, the Joe Rogan show or something, but we have a decent amount of listeners without doing any sort of advertising or marketing. So whether or not that's the branding or the content, the fact is that there are people out there that buy into it, right? So.
Okay, so you've made an opening. I've meant to say this many times, and I don't think I have. It's very humbling to have anybody listening, and especially with not doing the traditional capitalistic route. And so, to those of you who have listened to any of our things, thank you. I think that's really nice. Yeah. Well, and that's a good way to end. Yeah, we talked about our brand a little bit, and it'll continue into the future. There'll be some things that are static and some things that are fluid, right? We're not gonna sell out to advertisers. We're not gonna do anything like that. It's always gonna be about the content. Mm-hmm. But the content, much like the image in a kaleidoscope, is always going to be shifting and fluid, and it's going to cause you to look in different ways and connect different things to try to make sense and meaning out of what it is that you're examining. So, and we'll talk about it in the future, I'm sure as well. So, until next time, keep pondering.